Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my dear Pharma Network. Today, I'm with you again, Nataliya Andreychuk from V7, and with me, an amazing guest of our studio, Joe Falcone. He is an experienced business leader in establishing, implementing, and executing centers of excellence for pharma companies. As well, he has the both sides of the coin. He's also experienced on the agency side, and we can leverage today in our conversation his experience on how today, in the while we are on the edge of technology innovation, to build the efficient center of excellence which is supposed to boost our content production. Hello, Joe. Please tell us something about you. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today in the studio.
Yeah, thank you, Natalia. Thank you for having me, and hello, everyone. As Natalia said, I'm excited to be here and glad to have this conversation. I have an agency background. I spent about 8 or 9 years in the digital agency world when digital was just becoming something. And I spent the last 14 or so years at Bristol Myers Squibb in a variety of roles from internal agency to leading digital strategy for medical affairs, commercial IT across our enterprise, and most recently leading modular content strategy for our organization. So happy to be here and certainly have a lot of experience across different functions that hopefully will give you some exciting and things to think about.
Thank you, Joe, for mentioning modular content. This is where we our interests met and where we are working together. We are successfully collaborating together with Joe and his and very well-known consultants in this topic, so that we are working together with our customers on modular content and its implementation, breaking down the myths and getting back to reality and implementing it to all sorts of content. So, but being back on the track to our initial purpose of this conversation, this is exactly the efficiency in the content production, in the content development, and setting up the operations like successfully. It means like there are a lot of experience needed and there are a lot of stuff to discuss, but we want to give today a couple of best practices recommendations and making sure like we share the different angle of our experience with you. So, Joe, from your point, from your perspective, how what is like not how what is making actually the center of excellence, which is developing a content, which is a center of content production, efficient and successful? What is the secret?
So I don't know if it's a secret, but it's so much to think about. I think there's two big parts to it. One is the actual production and the process and the training and thinking that through, and also the change management aspect, of course. And then there's the sort of excellence part that you mentioned, right? I think there's a level of excellence that has to be sort of governance and oversight to help pull things through and to also learn from different markets on the sort of production or factory point of digital content. I think the key there that people often overlook is some of the details that may seem small, but they really, really have a big impact if you don't do them right. And I'm talking about things like channel standards, the impact there from a customer experience perspective, the impact from an HCP, seeing emails from different brands potentially or across different websites, right? And everything looks different, functions different. I think that's important, and the efficiency it brings to the MLR process, and whatnot. I think the other part that's really, really important is things like naming conventions. How you work with your agencies and how you ask them to hand off files to whoever's doing the production, whether it's an internal team or an outsourced team is not important. But when an agency gets a handoff, 24, 48 hours before a launch, and they don't know how to navigate those files because the naming convention doesn't match what they're used to seeing, and whatnot. It can cause a lot of churn and often delay marketing communications getting out at the critical time of launch. So there's a lot of small things like that that often get overlooked. From the excellence perspective, I mentioned standards before, and I think having a team that oversees the standards, and standards doesn't mean inflexible, right? It just means best practices. You still can have flexibility from a branding, look and feel, and even a functionality perspective, especially when you start taking into account local market or regional needs and nuance. It doesn't mean, my way or the highway, right? So, but I think the team of excellence there can help onboard, help teams get understanding of how to engage effectively, and to eliminate as many of the sort of roadblocks that come up throughout the content lifecycle that we've learned those lessons over and over again. So I think setting up that team internally is key because they understand the culture of the company. You can't really outsource excellence. I think that's got to be internal. And I think a lot of times the last sort of nugget I'll give you on this particular question, uh, in my initial answer is the focus is always on efficiency. And I think that the problem is the focus should be on effectiveness and experience. Efficiency will come in its own time, because if your main goal is efficiency and not experience, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and a lot goes into it, and you may not see the efficiency you might want, but you will see it in other ways by having a good experience for your internal stakeholders and your external customers. You'll get good business results, and then the money will come in that way versus looking at, all right, is it $12 less to make this email?
Exactly. This is a very good comparison. So, do you think there is a way to monitor, to track those results? Because they're talking about effectiveness and experience. So, do you see anything which will make it possible from the perspective if we will always check the baseline, some kind of reporting? So, do we even have all those data which will help us to go in the right way?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Not everything is as easy to measure as you would like. I think it's a matter of assuming, right, you've agreed on what do you want to measure, um, and that you have the mechanisms in place to collect that. I mean, there's a lot of creative ways to come up with ways to measure things. And when I was in IT, right, part of my role was managing a digital roadmap for different business units, and proposing and building business cases for significant multi-million dollar investments. And we always had to justify what's the ROI for what we're going to do, and how do we measure that. And sometimes it was just as simple as, okay, key stakeholder interviews. So if you think back to the customer side of HCPs, maybe it's doing certain ad boards or participating in larger industry sort of surveys to help gain insights from the customers that are receiving the information to see if that experience truly has improved. There's a lot of good ways to partner to get that data. But sometimes it's really has to be like interview style to get that information.
Yeah, that's yes, this is the old style, but the very sure one. So like the interview style to get those information. But with the experience, that means like we will be very new in some at some point. Like we will set up some expectation from our team, like to deliver some target digital asset with the shortened time to market by certain percentage. We need to make sure like we are owning this data, we are able to measure this data, we do have the technical setup and the reports built so that they are measuring the data and we are on this data all the time to monitor where we are. So that's also an important baseline, from my perspective how we see that. So from the other angle, Joe, from your perspective, do you think the how you set up this center of excellence, you can change and impact organization? What is the role of center of excellence in farm organization? Is yes, you say like in-house or outsourced, doesn't matter, but what is the role? What we mean to improve by setting up the center of excellence?
Yeah, I mean the center of excellence will play a few different key roles, right? I said one of them is, I think in pharma it's pretty common to see people changing roles in the marketing space. They often jump from brand to brand, indication, they move up in the organization, or they leave. So knowledge transfer is lost a lot, with respect to the brand teams as well as their partnership with the omnichannel teams to execute. So I think that center of excellence can be a bridge to help when new people come on board, to help shorten that learning curve, make them understand how to engage depending on what they're trying to accomplish based on their role. So that's first. The second thing I think is the key partnership between a center of excellence and the team trying to execute, like the omnichannel team, which sits in most pharma organizations, coming up with the brand plan, looking at their budgets and determining, okay, what do we want to do based on what we know is happening with this particular brand? What does our competitive market look like, right? So that execution and planning of the omni-channel strategy, partnering with them as they work through that, not after, right? Being part of that process to help them understand what tools do we have in place, right, to effectively get the word out, whether it's personalization, whether it's hitting a certain target market based on their segments, looking at channel preferences, looking at the data. I think oftentimes I think they're focused on just the budget and how do I get the maximum out of my budget in terms of media spend, right, and agency spend. And I don't think they understand necessarily how to partner with the capabilities teams to execute. So I see the center of excellence is able to help them through that and also point out all the lessons learned of things that they may not have seen before, whether that be roadblocks in the MLR process or how you share a brief to the digital content factory to execute on something in particular. It's words really matter. So how you onboard someone to what you're asking them to do, and get it right the first time. So I think the center of excellence can help with all of that. And I think the last thing that the center of excellence can really make an impact on is organizations are big, right? You're going to have things that work for certain markets and certain teams, and they can partner, whether they have boots on the ground in local markets or partners and ambassadors that they can count on to get information, let's say on a quarterly basis. They can help bring trends that come from those markets up to the enterprise. It could be therapeutic area based, it could be market specific, culture differences, things that can help evolve the global set of standards that you have. Because as I said earlier, right, it's not just one thing, and this is the way to do it. There are needs that needs require flexibility, and I think that center of excellence can help continually optimize the processes you have in place to execute at a level of excellence that is sort of a continuous learning.
Yes, this is very important, the continuous improvement and continuous learning, and this true partnership between the vendor or the entire inside the organization, if it is the internal operation. So this must be very transparent partnership, very transparent reporting, transparent communication, which is helping to build the bridges and to be successful. Um, this is like the best practices. You already discovered and told us that there is no secret, right, in how you set up it. There are no secrets, so that's a good point. However, perhaps from your career, you have an impressive career in pharma and in agencies. You have seen different cases. What you will indicate as best practices in setting up of COE?
I think the most important, probably best practice and secret that often gets overlooked is really having a partnership cross functionally and getting that team on board and understanding their position and how that team and the changes that you're about to try to implement will help them. Finding other people's why is really important, and I think that you'll find that people are open to being part of evolution and innovation. So I think that's the key best practice, is really just being cross-functional in your thinking.
Yeah, and people are in the center of innovation and cross-functionality. Yes, that's right. I cannot stay aside of this question. AI is changing the world. So, do you think we are expecting any change of how we setting up the modern centers of excellence using AI? What will change?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for AI, for me, I like to call it augmented intelligence, not artificial, because I think it's a partner. AI is a partner for us to evolve the ways we work and to work smarter. I think, there's so much that we can do. I think the key is setting up really, like, what are the most important use cases where AI can make a difference. And it's listen, tomorrow the advances in AI could change so significantly that this answer would be outdated, right? And that's fine. But I think that, things like AI, you could develop an AI agent that could help. So not necessarily you have to have tons of resources, be in the center of excellence, right? But how do you give people a first line uh, agent to go to ask some questions to help them understand and navigate, the repositories that are there, the documentation that's there, the processes, all that. That's a lot of information, and AI is really good at helping distill that down. And I think the second thing that I think is going to be key to AI, and I hope people start to do this, even at the lower education levels, is, people need to understand how to make that part of their DNA. How do I prompt AI? How do I leverage AI best in those best practices? So I think COEs can help that way too. Maybe have like sort of a training component to them to help get people more comfortable with how to leverage AI, or how to build a use case that makes sense to focus on.
That's a brilliant answer because having, instead of artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, that means like to receive a true partner who is evolving together with you. And to our point, with setting up COE centers today, so we will get the access to the data which will help us to train those agents of tomorrow, right? So that's why this is just the right time. Do not wait, but start experiment or connect to this idea of standardization of your content creation process, and not only that process, also omni-channel and modular. We need to start early. But what are your recommendations to those who are in the beginning of this journey, or they want to change how they set up the content operations already? So, do you have some kind of recommendations for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest piece of advice would be, don't try to be perfect, right? Progress, not perfection. Don't be afraid to just start and make mistakes. I think sitting around and waiting is way worse than failing. And I also think that if you learn from what you did, you didn't fail either, right? So, uh, I mean, we all know a common brand that has a saying that I won't say, right? But I think you just start doing stuff, and don't be afraid to fail and to make mistakes, and count on others, ask other people's opinions, get their thoughts, be inclusive. And certainly there's a lot of information out there, so just play too, even in your personal life. Go to ChatGPT, go to some of the other tools that are out there, and see how it can help and what it does. And don't be afraid to ask it how it can help you. Like, don't just ask the question you want to know, but ask GPT how you should ask it a question. Like,
Yeah,
use it for what its power is.
So challenge the challenge, right? So like if you
Yeah.
are challenged and you have the answer, so you can challenge back actually and figure out how the answer was built for you. That will be your measurement whenever you can leverage these answers or not. That's very true. And where we are not losing the human touch, going to automation too much, because the heart of automation paradox, like when we automate we just need more people. So that's that's how it is. Great, so thank you so much for being with us. That's an excellent and I would say inspiring end of the conversation. I hope to see you more in the next episodes of our podcast and wish you all the best and thank you. With us was Joe Falcone. So we have discussed the operations effectiveness and efficiencies in building COE Center of Excellence, especially in content creation business. Thank you.
Thank you so much.